Charlie Kirk was gunned down in broad daylight, but now the story everyone accepted is falling apart. Joe Rogan says this isn't just strange, it's suspicious, and he's laying out the details that make no sense. Why would a 22-year-old use a 100-year-old rifle and magically reassemble it on a rooftop? And what about the decoy man who's somehow been spotted at every major American tragedy? Joe calls it horse, and he's not alone. Candace Owens says Charlie predicted his own death just 24 hours before it happened in writing. Now she's revealing secret communications, untraceable military aircraft, and missing millions at Turning Point USA, even Charlie's widow. Erica is under scrutiny after taking over the company just 72 hours after his murder. The internet's buzzing, insiders are whispering, and this story is about to explode. What they've uncovered will make you rethink everything. Get ready, nothing is what it seems. It started with a single headline: Charlie Kirk, dead at 31. What looked like a tragic, high-profile political assassination quickly spiraled into a web of contradictions. And at the center of the unraveling storm are two of the most vocal figures in conservative media: Joe Rogan and Candace Owens. They're not just raising eyebrows, they're raising alarms. Joe Rogan, known for cutting through the noise, immediately questioned everything about the story, from the bizarre murder weapon to the absurd timeline of events. Candace Owens, never one to hold back, went even deeper, bringing forward receipts, actual written communications that point to Charlie Kirk knowing he was going to die just hours before the bullet hit. Both are asking the question that no one in the mainstream dares to voice. Was this an inside job? Because when you start piecing together all the strange details, something stinks. Bad. Charlie wasn't just a political figure. He was a threat to the establishment. Just days before his murder, he announced a full internal audit of Turning Point USA. Millions of dollars were unaccounted for. And Charlie was ready to expose whoever was responsible, no matter how high up it went. And then, just like that, he was gone. Joe Rogan's reaction wasn't the usual. Politically safe condolences you'd expect from someone in his position. No, Joe went off script. During a live podcast recording, the news broke mid-show. You could hear the tension in his voice shift. He went from curious to disturbed in a heartbeat. Charlie Kirk got shot. Is he dead? He asked, scanning his phone for updates. The raw disbelief in his tone wasn't staged. Joe knew something didn't feel right from the moment the news dropped, and it didn't take long for him to start dissecting the facts. First came the murder weapon. According to officials, the shooter, 22-year-old Tyler Robinson, used an antique World War I rifle. Not just any gun, but one so old it had no serial number and needed to be disassembled and reassembled with precision. According to the story, Tyler smuggled the gun piece by piece in a backpack, scaled a rooftop at Utah Valley University, then rebuilt the weapon up there before firing the fatal shot. Joe laughed. "Shut the F*** up," he said on air. "That's not even remotely believable." And he's right. A 22-year-old with no military background somehow assembles a century-old rifle on a roof and pulls off a perfect shot during a public event. That's not a murder. That's Mission Impossible. Except no one's buying Tom Cruise as the lead in this story. Meanwhile, Candace Owens was working her own angles. While Joe questioned the physical logistics, Candace went straight for the motivant, the chilling premonitions. According to her, Charlie told 3 people just one day before he died that he believed he was going to be killed. Let that sink in. Not a week before. Not a paranoid passing comment. The day before. And 2 of those people have written proof text messages from Charlie himself. Candace shared this revelation during her own show, voice steady, eyes fierce. Charlie told them, "I think they're going to kill me." Her words hit like a sledgehammer. That's not just a bad feeling. That's a man who knew something big was about to go down. And the kicker: those people haven't come forward publicly yet. Candace says she's hoping they will, now that the pressure is on. Because this detail changes everything. If Charlie predicted his own death and named names, the question becomes, who is they? And why is no one in law enforcement taking that lead seriously? But it doesn't stop there. Candace dropped another bomb, one that left conspiracy theorists spinning and skeptics stunned. She revealed that on the very same day, Charlie Kirk was shot. A military plane with the tail number N1098L flew from Texas to Utah and circled over the university during the time of the incident. This isn't a rumor. There are flight records. Candace traced the ownership of the aircraft to LaSalle Aviation LLC, a company with known ties to military contracts. The plane dipped low over the area right around the time of the shooting and then vanished. What was a military-grade aircraft doing in the vicinity of a politically motivated killing? Candace didn't mince words. This was a military operation, she declared. And suddenly, a political assassination started looking more like a covert hit. Even more disturbing, no one, not the FAA, not the FBI, not even the Department of Defense, has provided any explanation for the plane's presence. Zero accountability. Zero transparency. While Candace and Joe lit the fuse, social media set the explosion. TikTok, X, and YouTube lit up with speculation, breakdowns, and slow-motion analysis of every second of footage from that day. Citizen journalists began reconstructing the timeline frame by frame. And what they found was even more disturbing. One viral clip shows a mysterious older man in the crowd during the shooting. Immediately after the shot was fired, this man began yelling, "I did it! I did it!" and reportedly even removed his pants. Sounds like a distraction, right? Here's the twist. This same man was allegedly seen at 9/11s, the Boston Marathon bombing, and several other tragic events. His face appears in archived footage again and again. Joe Rogan addressed this directly. "What are the odds?" he asked. "Run it through an AI model. The probability of this guy being at every single one of these events is basically zero unless he's a plant." Joe floated the theory that this man was a decoy professional, agitator deployed to confuse eyewitnesses and muddy the timeline. And just when it couldn't get more bizarre, the man was arrested days later, not for the shooting, but on child-related charges, ensuring he'd be silenced indefinitely behind legal walls. A conveniently timed arrest that locked away the one person who might have seen everything. And what about the shooter himself? Tyler Robinson is a ghost. Almost no digital footprint. No manifesto. No trail of anger or motive. His own parents, according to Candace's sources, don't even believe he did it. Contrary to media reports, Tyler wasn't turned in by his father. It was a retired police officer and family friend who supposedly urged him to surrender after being informed that he'd been identified as the shooter. Tyler, reportedly confused, insisted he was innocent. Candace says there's no evidence Tyler had ever even visited Utah Valley University before that day. So how would he know the rooftop layout well enough to execute a perfect assassination? It doesn't add up. None of it does. And the more people dig, the messier the story gets. This wasn't just a sloppy investigation. It feels like a deliberate cover dash up the deeper Joe and Candace dig. The more public trust erodes. It's not just about Charlie Kirk anymore. It's about the implications of a political machine so powerful that it can erase truth, plant decoys, and spin a narrative so bizarre it collapses under its own weight. Millions are watching now. And for the first time, they're asking questions the mainstream refuses to answer. Why was a military aircraft circling during a public shooting? Why was an antique weapon used when dozens of modern options existed? Why did the widow of the victim take over the organization within 72 hours? smiling on camera and pushing content as if nothing happened. These aren't fringe questions. These are the questions Joe Rogan and Candace Owens are demanding the world confront. And the answers, if they ever come, could tear down the entire house of cards as the spotlight intensified. All eyes turned to the one person who had remained eerily composed since the tragedy: Erica Kirk, Charlie's widow, within just 3 days of her husband's public execution. She took the helm of Turning Point USA. That's right, 72 hours after, Charlie's blood was still fresh on the concrete. Erica was back in front of the cameras, filming polished content, smiling, talking about the future of the movement as if she hadn't just watched her husband die in front of thousands. Nick Fuentes, known for his brutally honest commentary, didn't hold back. "Something's off," he said. "You don't just bury the love of your life and start running a multi-million-dollar political machine like it's business as usual. Unless, of course, you already plan for that future." Those words sent shockwaves through social media. It wasn't just about how quickly Erica stepped in, it was about how rehearsed she looked doing it. People started comparing footage of her post-death interviews to old videos. The tone had changed. The energy had shifted. She didn't seem like someone shattered. She seemed like someone taking control. And here's where things get even more twisted. Candace Owens revealed that right before his death, Charlie Kirk had ordered a full-blown internal audit at Turning Point USA. He had questions, big ones, about where the money was going. Millions of dollars missing. Donors started noticing. Missing. Donors started noticing discrepancies, and Charlie was determined to get to the bottom of it. And then, a week later, he's dead. Convenient. Coincidental. Or something far darker. That audit never happened. It was buried along with him. And Erica. She never once mentioned the missing funds. Not in interviews. Not in press releases. Not even in private, according to insiders. It was like the whole financial scandal disappeared the second Charlie did. Candace Owens dropped another bombshell. She had a vivid dream. In it, Charlie appeared to her and said he had been betrayed. Now you can roll your eyes at dreams all you want, but Candace believes it. And she said the betrayal wasn't vague, it was personal, from inside the circle. People Charlie trusted. And she believes the truth is going to come out soon. Whether people are ready for it or not. Joe Rogan, meanwhile, was focused on the inconsistencies in the crime itself. He couldn't stop thinking about the rooftop, the location, the timing, the fact that no one saw Tyler Robinson climb up there or assemble a rifle. How the hell do you get on a college roof in broad daylight without anyone noticing? Joe asked, "Where's the drone footage? Where's the campus security footage?" He pointed out that the shot was perfect to perfect. One shot, one kill. From a century-old weapon with no scope, no stabilization, no modern enhancements. And it was supposedly fired by a 22-year-old kid with no military background and no known expertise with firearms. Joe said bluntly, "You could give a trained sniper that setup and they'd still miss. You're telling me this random kid nailed it? I'm not buying it, and neither are millions of others." The online sleuths have taken over, mapping out the UVU campus, comparing building heights, estimating trajectory angles. Their conclusion: the official timeline is impossible. And then there's the decoy suspect. The man who shouted, "I did it," immediately after the shooting, who strips his pants down and acts like a lunatic in the crowd. He gets arrested, but not for the shooting. He's charged with unrelated child exploitation crimes. Just like that, he's out of public view, and no one can question him. Here's the kicker. This same man has shown up at other historic tragedies. 9/11. The Boston bombing. Multiple mass shootings. The guy is a walking tragedy magnetor. He's a professional distraction. Joe called it the weirdest coincidence I've ever heard. Then followed it with which probably means it's not a coincidence at all. The deeper they dig, the more the story starts to resemble a manufactured narrative, perfect storm of chaos. Planted suspects, missing footage, and vanishing evidence. Candace also pointed out a strange fact. Tyler Robinson, the alleged shooter, wasn't even enrolled at Utah Valley University. He was accepted to Utah State. That's a different campus altogether. So how does someone with no connection to the university know the exact rooftop layout? How does he time it perfectly to strike during Charlie's Q&A session? How does he disappear without a trace and then confess through a third-party ex-cop family friend? And most importantly, why was Tyler completely silent during his arrest? According to Candace's sources, he didn't say a word about guilt. He kept repeating that he didn't know what was going on. And yet, within hours, the case was declared closed. No trial, no further investigation. Just a single shooter narrative with a neat little bow on top. Except now, that bow is unraveling. Behind the scenes, sources are talking. Not just to Joe and Candace, but to independent journalists, whistleblowers, even former Turning Point insiders. Anonymous tips are pouring in. Rumors of internal power struggles, financial cover-ups, personal vendettas. Some say Charlie had enemies not just outside the organization, but within. People who didn't like his sudden interest in transparency. People who stood to lose everything if he followed through on that audit. And those whispers are growing louder. Every time Erica Kirk appears in public with her polished image and carefully crafted words, it fuels more suspicion. She's begun dodging press questions, canceling interviews, avoiding any unscripted moments. And when asked about the audit, silence. Complete and total silence. Candace Owens, on her show, called out the conservative establishment for ignoring these red flags. She named names: Tucker Carlson, Megyn Kelly, even members of the Turning Point board, and asked why none of them were speaking up. If Charlie Kirk meant anything to you, she said, you'd be demanding answers, not protecting narratives. And Joe backed her up. On his own podcast, he pointed out how quickly people started rewriting Charlie's legacy, sanitizing it, softening it, removing the parts that made him dangerous to the status quo. They want to turn him into a martyr, Joe said, because it's easier than admitting he was a threat. And that threat, according to Candace, may have gotten him killed. Social media exploded once again. Hashtags like hashtag Justice for Charlie and hashtag What Really Happened trended for days. Memes of Erica Kirk smiling during interviews were overlaid with captions like "Too soon" and "Grief" or "PR." TikTokers began analyzing her body language, comparing her reaction to other widows of public tragedies. And what they found was chilling. No tears, no hesitation, just flawless delivery. Erica Kirk, once seen as the grieving widow, is now being framed as the orchestrator of a cover-up, or, at the very least, a willing participant. Candace didn't accuse her directly, but she made one thing clear. When someone profits from silence, that silence is never innocent. Now the pressure is building. Joe Rogan wants the files. Candace wants the text messages released. The public wants the footage. And every day that passes without answers just makes the theory stronger. Charlie Kirk didn't just die. He was eliminated. And the people responsible are still walking free, hiding behind carefully worded statements and strategic silence. But the walls are closing in. And as Joe said on his show, the truth has a funny way of leaking out, even when everyone's trying to plug the holes. As pressure mounts and silence thickens, one thing becomes painfully clear. The people closest to Charlie Kirk aren't saying a word. Joe Rogan called it out on his podcast, asking bluntly, "Where's the outrage?" Because in moments like these, you expect his allies, people who worked with him, filmed with him, strategized with him, to be standing on every rooftop demanding answers. But they're not. They're hiding. The silence is deafening. And as Candace Owens pointed out, this is exactly what corruption counts on: people too scared to rock the boat, too loyal to the structure, too invested in their own image to speak the truth. The best way to silence a movement, she said, is from the inside. That line hit hard. Because what's unfolding isn't just the unraveling of a murder mystery. It's the slow public exposure of rot within the walls of a movement that once claimed to stand for liberty, integrity, and truth. But while some remain quiet, others are turning up the heat. Independent journalists have begun following the money trail that Charlie was chasing before his death, and what they're finding is disturbing. Shell companies, shady donations, inflated budgets, contracts awarded to friends and relatives of top executives. And what makes it even more sinister? Some of these financial arrangements trace back to entities with ties to government intelligence programs. Now, why would Turning Point USA see a conservative youth nonprofit be intertwined with intelligence-linked groups? That's a question no one wants to answer. And yet, the evidence is stacking up. Paper trails, tax forms, SEC filings, they're painting a picture of a deeply compromised organization. One that Charlie may have finally realized was being used. And if he threatened to expose it, that makes his death not just tragic, it makes it dangerous to the people behind the curtain. And then there's the dream, the one Candace can't shake. In her own words, Charlie came to her clear, urgent, betrayed. In the dream, he didn't just say he was hurt. He said he was betrayed by someone on the inside. Candace described it as a spiritual experience, one that left her shaken and moved to act. You can choose not to believe in dreams. You can laugh it off. But Candace doesn't. She's said over and over that her instincts have guided her throughout her career. And she believes Charlie's spirit is crying out for justice. In the dream, she said, he told her, "They're trying to erase me. Don't let them." And it's hard not to see how that could be true. Because the further we get from the date of his death, the more the narrative is being rewritten. He's being remembered as a kind-hearted patriot, but the fire, the edge, the revolutionary spirit, that part is being sanitized. And Candace isn't having it. She said point blank, Charlie Kirk was dangerous to the system. That's why they wanted him gone. To the system. That's why they wanted him gone. Joe Rogan took a different angle, psychological. He analyzed Erica Kirk's behavior, not from a place of accusation, but from observation. Everyone grieves differently, he admitted. But there are patterns. And what he saw didn't fit. Not just the quick return to media appearances, but the tone. The performative ease. The lack of hesitation. It looked like she'd been prepping for this, Joe said. Like she already knew the playbook. He pointed to the fact that within 3 days, she had control of Charlie's passwords, his email accounts, the keys to the kingdom. She didn't skip a beat. And more importantly, she didn't invite any investigation into what happened. She didn't hire private security. She didn't question the official timeline. She didn't even request a second autopsy. That's not normal, Joe said. If someone I loved got taken out in public, you better believe I'd want every camera angle, every witness, every single piece of information. But she? Nothing. And that's when people started asking the question no one wanted to ask. Was Erica Kirk involved? It's a dangerous question, one that opens up the floodgates. But it's being whispered louder and louder, because it's not just her behaviors, the connections. Erica's ties to political donors, to government-backed, faith-based initiatives. Two high-ranking figures with long histories in propaganda and public manipulation. She wasn't just Charlie's wife. She was his gatekeeper, and possibly his liability. One former Turning Point employee, speaking anonymously, said Erica was obsessed with optics, that everything had to be filtered through her lens of control, that Charlie had grown increasingly frustrated in the weeks leading up to his death. He felt trapped, the source said, like he was being watched, even at home. That quote is now circulating everywhere. And it raises the possibility that Charlie may have discovered something too big, too damaging, and that he shared it with the wrong person. Which brings us to the final, most damning piece of the puzzle, the audit. Just 7 days before his death, Charlie Kirk posted a cryptic video on his private Telegram. In it, he promised to shake the foundations of corruption. He said the audit was about more than just numbers. That it would expose a network of lies that went all the way to the top. That video was removed within 24 hours, gone, scrubbed, not archived, not backed up, but fragments remain. Downloaded clips, screenshots, metadata, and in one chilling moment, Charlie looks directly at the camera and says, "If anything happens to me, you'll know why." That moment, those 10 words are now viral, printed on t-shirts, quoted in captions, and burned into the minds of everyone watching this unravel. Because now something did happen to him, and the people he trusted most are pretending like it was just random. A senseless act, a tragic fluke, but people like Joe and Candace aren't buying it. They're not accepting the official story. They're not staying quiet for the sake of appearances. They're pushing, demanding, digging, because someone has to. Someone has to honor what Charlie stood for, not just his political positions, but his refusal to be silenced. Candace said it best: if you want to honor him, don't sanitize him. Don't pacify him. Finish what he started. And that's what this script is doing. Finishing what he started. Asking the questions. Ignoring the threats. Following the truth no matter how dark it gets. But the truth is ugly. Messy. It implicates people you don't want to suspect. It destroys illusions you've held for years. It challenges everything you thought was real. And that's why so many are resisting it. Because to believe that Charlie Kirk was murdered in cold blood by people within his own circle, that's almost too much to process. But the facts don't lie. The inconsistencies pile up. The motives are crystal clear. The evidence, while fragmented, is overwhelming. And the silence from the people who should care most, that's louder than any scream. At this point, it's not just a story. It's a movement. A ripple turning into a wave. And that wave is crashing straight into the narrative that people in power desperately want to preserve. Joe Rogan isn't playing games anymore. On his podcast, he leaned into the camera and said, "You can't ignore energy like this. Something is trying to come out, and we're either going to see it or get crushed trying." He's not wrong. The more questions get raised, the more people are waking up and demanding answers. This isn't about politics anymore. It's about truth. Real truth. The kind that doesn't come wrapped in PR statements or sanitized headlines. The kind that lives in hidden emails, off-the-record texts, hushed whispers in conference rooms, and encrypted files buried in the cloud. That's where the real story lives. And Joe and Candace are leading the charge to bring it into the light. Meanwhile, anonymous insiders are starting to crack. Leaks are pouring in from former Turning Point staffers' mails, calendar invites, strange payment records. One email in particular is now going viral. Dated 5 days before Charlie's death, it was sent from a senior financial officer to an unnamed outside consultant. The subject line: urgent adjustments before internal review. The body of the email has one chilling sentence: "If CK sees these numbers, we're done." That one line has been quoted thousands of times across platforms. If CK sees these numbers, we're done. It doesn't get more direct than that. Charlie was close. Too close. And whoever was benefiting from the missing millions had everything to lose. Maybe that was the motive. Not ideology. Not politics. Just greed, the oldest and deadliest reason of them all. And then, like clockwork, the smears began. After Candace's dream confession and Joe's detailed podcast breakdown, a sudden wave of hit pieces started circulating. Articles calling them conspiracy theorists. Analysts questioning their mental health. Verified accounts accusing them of exploiting a tragedy. But it was too late. The people had already heard. The dam had cracked. And the more the establishment tried to discredit them, the more people started believing them. Why? Because truth doesn't need perfection. It needs courage. And both Joe and Candace were willing to say what others wouldn't. Candace even said it. On air, "I'm not trying to win a popularity contest. I'm trying to win justice for Charlie." Those words hit hard. Because the ones who actually knew Charlie, who actually loved him, aren't staying silent. They're rising up, screaming into the void that this wasn't just a random act of violence. It was something deeper, more organized, more intentional. And it didn't stop with the podcast circuit. New footage surfaced raw. Unedited video from someone attending the Utah Valley event where Charlie was killed. The footage shows a brief moment right before the shooting. A figure, dressed in black, moving across the adjacent rooftop. It's blurry, it's grainy, but it's there. And it's not Tyler Robinson. Too tall, too broad. Different build entirely. But no one's talking about that person. The police report makes no mention. The surveillance footage from nearby buildings, conveniently missing. The camera facing that rooftop, under maintenance that day. It's laughable if it weren't so terrifying. Because this kind of erasure doesn't happen by accident. It happens when people at the top don't want the truth seen. Joe Rogan called it a coordinated blackout. And Candace said it outright. We're not dealing with incompetence. We're dealing with cover-up. The missing footage, the strange military plane. The antique weapon that doesn't function under modern conditions. The impossible rooftop jump. The decoy suspect who disappears into a child crime scandal. All of it feels like a screenplay. Except this time, the audience isn't just watching. They're investigating, digging, asking questions. And for the first time in a long time, they're not waiting for permission to speak up. They're going to make noise whether the media wants them to or not. But the biggest twist came just days ago. A whistleblower, known only by the alias Atlas, posted a 14-minute video on a decentralized streaming platform. In it, they claim to be a former cybersecurity analyst hired to audit Turning Point USA's digital infrastructure. They show screenshots, deleted files, odd network pings, server logs indicating remote access from untraceable IPs in DC and Virginia. One document stood out, a PDF marked Eyes Only. The title? CK Audit Contingency. The contents haven't been made public yet, but Atlas promised a data dump in the coming days. And the internet is bracing for impact. Erica Kirk, meanwhile, is playing it cool. Too cool. Her recent interview with a mainstream outlet was called poised and gracious, but viewers weren't buying it. The comment sections were brutal. She's reciting lines. Where's the emotion? Why isn't she angry? Because that's what people expect from a widow in search of truth. Not serenity. Not branding. Not rehearsed forgiveness. Real grief is messy. It breaks you. But Erica's image remains pristine. Even her latest press photos were perfectly lit, her hair styled, her smile gentle but firm. And that disconnect is unsettling people. One viral TikTok stitched Erica's post-shooting footage with Candace's most damning quote. "Forgiveness without truth is betrayal." That video alone has 10 million views and counting. That video alone has 10 million views and counting. And just when you think it can't get darker, another layer emerges. It's now being reported that Turning Point USA's insurance policy on Charlie's life was adjusted less than 2 weeks before his death. The beneficiary? Not just Erica, but a trust linked to an unnamed third party. Financial analysts are calling it highly irregular. Investigators are calling it cause for concern, and the public. They're calling it exactly what it looks like. Motive? Because when you tie together the audit, the insurance, the power shift, and the eerie lack of grief paints a picture nobody wants to look at. But it's there, and it's real, and it's not going away. Joe Rogan ended his last episode with a warning. Not a prediction. A warning. The truth has teeth, he said. You can ignore it, bury it, smear it, but eventually it bites back. Candace, on her show, echoed the sentiment. Something's coming, she said. I can feel it. And when it hits, it's going to burn everything fake to the ground. These aren't the words of entertainers chasing clout. These are the words of people who've seen too much and are now willing to risk everything to expose what they know. So now, the world watches, waiting for more footage. For leaked documents, for confessions, for cracks in the armor. Because the story of Charlie Kirk's death isn't just a political tragedy. It's a national reckoning. A mirror held up to the machinery that runs beneath our headlines. And that mirror is shattering, piece by piece. Truth by truth. Lie by lie. And once it's broken, there's no putting it back together. If you've made it this far, you already know this story doesn't add up. Too many questions. Too many convenient gaps. And not nearly enough outrage from the people who should be screaming the loudest. Joe Rogan and Candace Owens didn't just throw accusations, they handed us the blueprint. Now it's on us to keep pushing. Don't let Charlie's name become another hashtag lost to silence. If you believe in truth, if you believe in justice, then hit that like button, subscribe, and turn your notifications all the way on. Because what's coming next isn't just commentary, it's revelation. And the people trying to bury this story, they're running out of time. When the next leak drops, when the next whistleblower speaks, when the next lie gets exposed, we'll want to be here, watching, ready? Because in a world of scripted narratives, your curiosity is rebellion. Stay loud, stay sharp. The truth is coming, and it won't be gentle, won't be gentle.